Good morning. To kick off this morning's event, our first speaker is Judkins. He's also known by the nickname of Maverick. He's an author, explorer, and archaeologist from Texas. He has a passion for searching for the truth about the mysteries of the past, exposing forbidden archaeology and forbidden history. He's also a producer, known for the 2014 film Finding Noah and Hidden Mountain, the Los Lunas Mystery Stone from 2012. He has appeared in Footprints in Stone, Forbidden History, Volume 2 in 2013, and Watchers 8 in 2014. Maverick has participated in numerous excavations throughout the U.S. and Israel, including the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem in 2004. He is credited with mapping the longest contiguous dinosaur trackway in the Western Hemisphere and discovering a new trail of dinosaur tracks, and they are nicknamed the Judkins Trail. Let me welcome to the stage, and it sounds like he deserves the nickname Maverick, Mr. Aaron Judkins.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Okay, we're going to get started this morning. Thank you for coming out at such an early morning. How many stayed up late? Yes, and you're here. Thank you for being here, by the way. I'm very honored that you would even come hear me. I do have a lot of information and content for you, so I want to be cognizant of your time because what I have to share with you I think is important. My job as an archaeologist is to research the mysteries of the past, and that's what I do. As you saw in the promotional film video trailer Finding Noah, I go to great lengths to bring you information to the highest of heights and the valleys and the tombs and but it's a lot of fun, and I am privileged to be able to be here talking to you about all these things. We're going to get started. The topic is the return of the Nephilim. How many know what the Nephilim are? Okay. I hope you learned something new because this is going to be a very fascinating topic, and my goal is that you would walk away either learning something new or having your presuppositions challenged a little bit. I know mine were when I was writing this book. I had some sacred cows that was slaughtered, and it's okay. I came to terms with it. But you know, there's some truth to these things, and I want to be able to share these things with you. This is my website. You can go there, follow me on everything that I do. Let's get to it. Fallen angels, the return of the Nephilim. Yes, we're talking about the fallen angels because they have something to do with this topic. Who are the sons of God? Where did the giants come from? When did they live? And what was the reason for the flood? We're going to start off with our target passage here, and this goes back to ancient historical writings, the guidebook to the supernatural, if you will. And most of this will be referenced from Genesis 6 because, after all, this is where the original term Nephilim came from. And it came to pass when the men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives, all of which they chose. That's the Genesis 6 passage. The sons of God. They are in Hebrew the B'nai Ha-Elohim. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came among them. I'm laying a foundation here for you so you can understand where the Nephilim came from. We see that the sons of God came, and that there was a day when the sons of God, notice the sons of God, again referenced, came and presented themselves. And when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. This is the B'nai Ha-Elohim. So how did the fallen angels get here? The fallen angels, as you guessed, are the reference to the sons of God in the Old Testament. How did they get here? There is a very fascinating book. It's not canonized, but it's called the Book of Enoch. How many heard of it? The Book of Enoch. In the Book of Enoch, it's almost like if you could, it's like reading a C.S. Lewis novel, or a Lord of the Rings movie, because when you start looking into this is some pretty wild stuff. It really is. And although we can't say with a surety that everything in there happened in history, we can't say that everything in there is true. It may give us some insight, though, into the past. If we could peer into the past a little bit, the Book of Enoch does that for us. And it says that Mount Hermon in Lebanon is the place where 200 Watcher-class angels made their entry on this planet. Now, most of y'all don't know this probably, but Hermon means the forbidden gate. See, Mount Hermon was the gateway to the gods. Mount Hermon was the gateway that they used to enter this planet. And we also have in history, Jerome, the early church father who translated the Bible into Latin, said that Mount Hermon, or Hermon, means anathema. What does that mean, anathema? Does anyone know? It means forbidden or restricted, right? But not just forbidden or restricted. It's almost as if it is a place that's restricted or forbidden because it is evil. That's the specific term that's used here, anathema, Mount Hermon. It's not just restricted or forbidden. It's forbidden because it's evil. There's an evil presence to it. Something happened back then that Jerome is saying that they used the term anathema when they talked about Mount Hermon. Their purpose was to induce the seed of the serpent into the human race. We're going to talk about this. This is Mount Hermon. Everybody see okay? This is Mount Hermon here. And you've probably heard about Mount Hermon. This is where the tribe of Dan moved into the area. Now, the tribe of Dan was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they were the first to break away and go and do their own thing up in the north. I've been to the tribe of Dan where we found where their place was. It's called Tel Dan, and they had built a huge altar there. And the gates and the walls, everything's still there. It's the walls are remarkably intact. I've been there twice. It's right near Lebanon, and it's pretty wild. They adopted the worship of the fallen angels, which was Baal worship. So they adopted the Canaanite deities and Ashtaroth from Mount Hermon. We're going to look at, because Baalbek, I'm sure you've heard a lot about this term, was a temple discovered honoring Baal in the city that was at the foot of Mount Hermon. This was considered the chief high place in that area. So we know from the stones of Baalbek in Lebanon that this is probably one of the great ancient mysteries of the past. You see how they have these huge foundation stones. Some of them are so huge you can't even move them with a crane today. So how did they do this? This is the foundation is still there. Matter of fact, when the Romans came in, the foundation for Baalbek, it was there. And they were so amazed. They marveled at the engineering of Baalbek because they had no clue how that was done. That's how awesome this is, because we're not talking just a little city with stones. That's what Tel Dan was. They just stacked stones. You know, as great as the feat of that is, I mean, it's a huge place. I mean, this is awesome. But this is at the foot of Mount Hermon, the place of anathema. We're going to talk about the giants before the flood. And it says that man would be, not living long. It would be only 120 years. But we know back in the Old Testament that at some time there was a long lifespan. The Nephilim, there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. This is the Genesis 6 passage that we're looking at, because this is where they came down on Mount Hermon from. The Nephilim. The Nephilim is referenced in the book of Enoch here, and they came to pass when the children had multiplied in those days. And again, we see that this is a convergence of evidence, if you will, that they came, the children of heaven, and then they came and they beget children. So this is a strange thing to read, because most people don't understand that fallen angels can take human form. Have you ever heard the term, we entertain angels unaware? Have you ever heard that term? How many have heard that sometimes, for instance, there was a story I heard that this elderly lady, she was driving at night on the road, and she had a flat tire, and she couldn't change the tire, and she needed help, and she didn't have a cell phone, and it was at night, and she was, by herself, and she didn't know what to do. And a car came up behind her suddenly with lights, and a gentleman came out about in his 30s, and he said, "Ma'am, do you need some help?" And she said, "Yes, I do. I have a flat tire." And he said, "Well, let me change it for you." That's all he said. He reached down, changed the tire. She said, "Thank you." She went to turn around and get in the car to leave. She turned around, and the man and the car was gone, disappeared. She said, "I don't know who that was, but someone helped me." We entertain angels unaware. There's multiple stories about angels taking human form. They don't have wings, not when they take human form. There's several types of classes of angels. We're not going to get into all that, but I want you to know there's a difference between like angels of Michael and Gabriel and the fallen angels. So we're talking about the fallen angels because these guys left their first estate. What does that mean? They had one estate of existence. See, we live in a terrestrial plane, don't we? We live in 4 dimensions. What are those 4 dimensions? Anybody? Length, height, width. What's the 4th one? Time. Very, very good. Time. So, but we understand that all those are finite. Time is finite. Scientists have slowed the speed of light down to 35 miles per hour. Can you believe that? 35 miles per hour. What's the speed of light? 186,282 miles per second, somewhere in there. But the speed of light can be slowed down. So what happens if you alter the speed of light? What? Yes, sir. Changes time. So what happens if you send 2 astronauts to Mars, packing for Mars, right? What happens if you send those guys out? What happens on Earth in relation to time? Right? What happens? The time on Earth is faster, isn't it? Right? Because the 2 astronauts, when they come back, they're not going to have aged. Everybody on the planet that they ever knew would probably have died. Now, we're talking deep time, maybe even past Mars. It takes a lot of distance just to get to our nearest star, Alpha Centauri, like 4.5 light years away. Now, what's a light year? 4.5 light years away. 4.5 light years doesn't sound far until you know that you have to travel at the speed of light at 186,000 miles per second. I think I said, what did I say a while ago? It's 186,000 miles per second. That's how fast it is. But you have to travel that fast for that long just to reach our nearest star. That's pretty far. That's vast, isn't it? And we're not even talking about deep time yet. We're not even talking about the next galaxy. We're not even talking about another solar system. We're talking about just getting to our nearest star. All right. The Grecians called them giants. What did the Greeks also call them? The Titans. That's where we get the Greek Titans from. Apollo and all those guys. And you're right. In Greek mythology, the Titans were powerful beings who were the offspring. And these guys went down through mythology and legends of old, and they were the Titans. And it says they were eventually overthrown and imprisoned in Tartarus, the depths of the underworld. There's a lot of stories with the Titans we won't get into, but just know that throughout history, there's been giants. Those Nephilim, Now, the Nephilim are not the fallen angels, by the way. The Nephilim are the offspring of the fallen angels. That's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? How does that happen? Because when they left their first estate, they could not go back. They had to be in human form until they physically died. They couldn't go back. Once they left and went in, that was it. And if you ever read the book of Enoch, it says that they knew they had messed up. Those 200 class watcher angels, there was one leader of them, and he was the one that kind of got them all together, and it names those guys. And it names what they were doing and why they got in trouble. And they understood that, wow, there's, we're in a big problem here. This is a big problem. And they asked Enoch to go before the Lord on their behalf because they knew they were doomed. So Enoch goes before the Lord and sees, if there's any hope for these guys, and there's not. These guys had to live out a physicality. They died, but at some point these guys came back. When those guys died, their spirits became disembodied spirits. So this gets into some realm of eschatology and theology and et cetera, but this happens because we see it happening today. I'm going to make that tie for you. And the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient in the days of Noah. So we understand that these things were happening back then, and this is nothing new. Nothing new is under the sun, right? Have you ever heard that? And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, it says in Jude, they were reserved everlasting change into the darkness. Something happened back then that they were not supposed to do, but they did it anyway. You tell your kid, don't do that, and they do it, right? Don't touch that hot stove. They go touch it. There's a choice that they had, in other words. They had a free will to choose. So, in Jude again, it says, the raging waves of the sea foaming at their shame and wandering stars. The stars are the reference to the angels, by the way, when you're reading it here. To whom is reserved blackness of darkness forever. And Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, behold, the Lord comes with thousands of his saints. This is showing that there was a war in heaven, and these fallen angels, which left their first estate, came down here to Mount Hermon, right, the place of anathema. And the angels were cast out with him. What am I talking about? I like to term it from a colleague of mine who I think put it very well, L.A. Marzulli. You probably heard of him. L.A. is a good friend of mine. He calls it the cosmic chess match. And that's what it really is going on here, cosmic chess match. When we talk about the flood, the flood came and destroyed the earth, not because of anything that necessarily that. Let me put it another way. When those fallen angels came in, they really began to interfere in the events and the affairs of mankind. And that's caused the problem, because what were they doing? They were blending their seed with the seed of man. This is strange stuff. And then they produced a race of giants called the Nephilim. But it says Noah was perfect in his generations. What does that mean? Noah wasn't perfect. It means that Noah was not polluted with the corrupt DNA or gene pool. Noah was about the only one in those days of the Nephilim that could be saved. The earth was corrupt and all flesh had corrupted. We know that the fallen angels came in and just really started messing things up. Also, if you read the book of Jasher, the book of Jubilees, all this will give you insights in addition to the book of Enoch. It's really mysterious. It's some strange stuff in there. But if you want to learn about the past, I'm not saying this is all truth. I'm saying it possibly can give you insight into what happened back in those days. And it certainly the convergence of evidence matches with what we know in history, the Titans, archaeology, etc. So we just talked about the giants before the flood. Now let's talk about the giants after the flood, because remember the flood came, it supposedly wiped everything out, right? Except for the people on the ark, right? Who's going to go see Finding Noah, by the way? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Finding Noah. Do y'all know about Finding Noah? You should. October 8th, this is a documentary film that chronicles our journey up Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey. And it's going to be a limited theatrical release October 8th. So it's a Thursday night. If you miss it on October 8th, it's it. You have to wait for it to come out on DVD. So, but it is a true documentary. It's directed by Brent Baum, produced by Matthew Marsden, narrated by Gary Sinise. So this is a very professional film. Giants after the flood. Numbers 13:33 and Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. After what? After that flood. So we know that these guys came back. So let's look at the timeline here. So this is kind of showing you a little bit about where this falls in the timeline. This is the giants after the flood. We'll move on. And then it starts giving the names and the races of these giants. In the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth, Canarim, and the Zuzumans in Ham, and the Emims in Shevav Kerathaim, and the Horites in Mount Seir. And then it gives the meaning of the names. The Rephaim, the invigorated ones, Emims, the terrors, Horims, the cave dwellers, the Zooms, wild creatures. This is pretty strange stuff, because we know that these guys were races of giants, and that when Israel went into Canaan, there were what? Giants in the land. This is where we start getting into the story of David and Goliath. We all know the story of David and Goliath. Did that story actually happen? Who was Goliath? Goliath was from Gath, and Goliath was from a race of giants called the Anakims. That should sound familiar to you, right? The Anakims, the children of Anak, were there. In Hebron, they built 7 years before Zoan was in Egypt, and the children of Anak were there. And they were in these walled cities. And they were like, the Israelites said they were like grasshoppers in their sights. Some scholars want to say that they were intellectual giants, right? They weren't smart enough to get in there. Some people say they weren't giants at all. But it's very clear that these guys were Nephilim, the sons of Anak were there. That they were like grasshoppers in their sight. These guys had physical traits that we don't have. They had 6 fingers and 6 toes. They had double rows of teeth. How many have heard about the red-haired giants? A little bit. The red-haired giants, Lovelock Cave, the Paiute Indians in Winnemucca, Nevada. And they found giant skulls in that cave that were still there. And on the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 1, I write a chapter in Chapter 9 about that. One of my friends actually got in there, and one of the ladies was in there, and he got to photograph those skulls. That's in the book. They found 2 pestles. You know what a pestle is? A pestle's a stone tool that's used for grinding by the Native Americans. They would grind on the, they would either take a mano and a matate, right? And they would grind corn or mesquite beans or whatever. But the pestles, it was a long cylinder rock, stone tool, and they would use it to chop corn or whatever. They found 2 pestles at the mouth of Lovelock Cave. One weighed 25 pounds and the other weighed 40. Can you see a little Native American woman trying to use a... No. these were giants, and these giants used these tools. So we see that there were giants after that. The Imims dwelled there as well, and they were as tall as the Anakims, which were also accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites called them Imims. So we know that these guys were there. Goliath had 4 brothers. Did you know that? Goliath had 4 brothers. How do we know that? Well, it tells us if you read that back there in Numbers, right? He had 4 brothers. So let's talk about David real quick. David's a little shepherd boy. He goes out to fight Goliath. He's taunting him, right? And Goliath goes to put on the king's armor, and he can't wear it. He's too small. He can't move in it. He goes, I've been a shepherd. I fought off all kinds of things on my sheep. He said, just let me go out there. He picks up how many rocks? He picks up 5. 1 for Goliath and 4 for his brothers. So if his brothers jumped in, he was ready, right? That's why he picked up 5. We're talking about the land of the giants. If you hear my radio show that I do every now and then, I say from the Valley of the Giants, because I do live in the Valley of the Giants. Not the Nephilim, but the giants, the big dinosaurs of Dinosaur Valley State Park. The Valley of the Giants, it's also known. These guys were a lot bigger than we are. Not just an abnormal growth of the anterior pituitary gland, right? Acromegaly. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about characteristics that are not human. And these guys were pretty big. King Og was some say between 12 and 15. I think he was roughly about 15 foot tall, depending on your definition of the cubit. And the cubit really changes throughout history. We know that a standard cubit after the flood was probably 18 inches. We do know that. A royal cubit, depending on the ruling monarch or pharaoh or king, varied. Typically an average of about 21 inches. But if he didn't have a firstborn son, which would be the length of his son, would be the royal cubit, or from his elbow to his finger would be a royal cubit. So those changed throughout time, but some point after, the standard cubit really began to take hold, and that was a cubit of 18 inches. So we see that these guys could get very, very tall, and we see these giants in the land of Canaan. So this is what we're talking about. King Og, it gives his length of his bedstead. And although it doesn't give the length of him per se, if you take his bed that it gives, and then you give a little bit more for head and feet room, we estimate King Og's height that way. So this is some pretty wild stuff. Here's King Og, by the way. His bedstead was a bedstead of iron, 9 cubits, and 4 cubits was the width. So we can get a really good idea. And Goliath, he went out a champion whose height was 6 cubits in a span. So you take, this, and you can figure out the numbers on this. These are just estimates because we don't know for sure. Here's King Og at 15 foot tall. Goliath, I think Goliath was probably a little taller than this. He was probably a little taller. I think these numbers are just, our best guesstimate. But it gives you a very good idea of where we're at on this scale. You see how small we are. When I went to climb Mount Ararat, I didn't see the summit for about 4 days, right? Because it's socked in by weather. And about the 4th day or so, we had the clear skies, and we were getting ready to make the climb to the mountain, and I saw that summit for the first time, and my heart sank because I realized I'm fixing to have to climb this thing, and I realized how small I was on this grand mountain. Yeah, I had the same feeling when I was next to the pyramids in Egypt. When you're standing next to it and you realize how small you are, it's really humbling. What do we find in archaeology about giants? We find throughout history, there is some archaeological evidence. The convergence of evidence is there. And one of these is a little ostracon, or pottery shard. It has an archaic inscription going back to the 10th century BC, contains 2 non-Semitic names, and one of that is named Goliath. This was found actually in the area of Gath. So if there's a name Goliath on a pottery shard, you don't have to say which one, right? Everybody knows who that is, right? There was another one, too, that was found. It was on a larger piece of Ostracon pottery, and I think it's called the 2 Gates inscription. You can look it up. But this is also the reference of the name Goliath on there. So we understand that Goliath's name has been found already on 2 independent dig sites in Israel in the area of Gath, where he was from. The ancient chimeras. We talked about the Titans in history and how all this is coming down, and that the mixture could have also produced chimeras. Why? Because if you read some of those other books I was telling you about, you understand that they just didn't mate with people. Right? These guys were all over the place. Right? So we have these unicorns and mermaids, and we have these the griffins, and we have all these strange things throughout history of a blend of animals and humans. It's very strange indeed. Did you know that science now is looking at modern chimeras? And if anyone has any more information on this, I'd be glad to get it. But according to the UK labs, 150 human-animal hybrids and embryos have been going secretly in July of 2011 for about 3 years. And they've been working on modern-day chimeras. Wonder why they would do that. Bringing back the Nephilim, transgenics, cybergenics. If anyone can vet that photo, I'm all open to it, because I don't know. But I do know that, sorry?
Ceramic art piece.
Ceramic art piece. You know that there are scientists and labs that are working on these chimeras. What about these? Could it be possible? I don't know. Was it possible that those guys existed in the past? Yes. Why do I say that? Because we see evidence for them in archaeology and in history. We do know that the lab is now using mice and things to grow cartilage. They can insert cartilage, and here they got this little guy growing a human ear. So we know that some weird things are possible, and they're even, South Korean scientists are even creating glowing cats. How many have heard about the spider milk? The spider milk, that they're blending some kind of a spider silk with the goats. So when the goats produce milk, it's a spider milk. So it produces some kind of I think they use it in steel production or something. They blend it in. It's super strong stuff, but they use it. And so instead of waiting on the little spiders to do it, they blend it in with the goats, and it produces in the milk. It's called spider milk. Kind of strange. This is a pretty famous picture of Genghis from the land of Genghis Khan in National Geographic. This photo, I think, was pretty much made famous by Steve Quayle in his book. 7 foot 5 inches, 1922. That's pretty big, isn't it? 7 foot 5, but not as big as those other guys that we just saw. This is Robert Wadlow. He was, at that time, the tallest human ever known. In his time, he was 8 feet 11 inches tall, and he was only 22. So now, Robert suffered from acromegaly. He was not a Nephilim, all right? But I'm just showing you the comparison of how tall people can get. And most people who suffer from acromegaly, Andre the Giant did. And they basically die at an early age because they die of cardiomyopathy or congestive heart failure, and they have poor health problems and they die at an early age. But this is within the realm of possibilities. And this is, matter of fact, I've seen his coat, and we have it at one of the museums. What about super soldiers? You think if they could create a super soldier, they would? Why would they do that? You want to win battles, don't you? If you're going into fight, you want to win. So, the human body is pretty fragile. That's why those guys have to wear all the equipment that they do, so they protect themselves, Kevlar vests and other things. But one of the things that they're working on is trying to create a super soldier. Now, I don't know that I'm not in the military, I don't know that for sure. But reports is that if they can make them bigger and stronger and faster and taller, that they're going to try. We're talking about the fallen angels again, and these guys did something in the past that they're doing again today. And this is the tie I'm going to make here, because the fallen angels have not stopped what they were doing in the very beginning. Now, some of my colleagues and friends said what they did in the past, they never did again. There was only one incursion. I don't believe that, because in this passages I just showed you in Numbers 13:33, it says, and also after that. These guys came back, not the same ones. It doesn't say the same ones. It says that there was others that came back, and it listed those races of giants, those Nephilim. So something happened. I believe that there was a second incursion, because it doesn't say all of them committed these things. Some of them did. So we see that the serpent is Nakash, or the shining one. And this goes back to Daniel 2:43. And it says that, now Daniel, you have to understand, he's a Hebrew, but he gets taken away into captivity into Babylon, okay, under King Nebuchadnezzar. And he takes away those guys for 70 years. They're held captive in Babylon. And Daniel has this dream, right, about the statue. But one of the things Daniel says is that he says, whereas thou sawest iron mixed with clay, and he's talking about that statue he saw. We won't get into the statue, but he's saying that iron mixed with clay, this is the toes at the bottom of the statue, they shall not mingle themselves with the seed of men. That's a very interesting statement, actually, that he's saying here. They shall not mingle themselves with the seed of men. Who's they? They shall not mingle themselves. Well, if they is those fallen angels, they shall not mingle themselves with the seed of men. It says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, but they shall not cleave to one another. In other words, what he's saying is they, whoever they are, and if they are the same they back then in Genesis 6, it's the same they of the fallen angels, they shall mingle themselves again with the seed of men, and they shall not cleave to one another, just like iron does not cleave with clay. He's telling you that something is going to mix with the seed of humanity again, and that will not cleave. That will not be a natural offspring. He's telling you that the return of the Nephilim will come back. This is in prophecy. No marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. We see this throughout history, that we have aliens. Now, let me tell you why I wrote about this. It's not because I was interested as a shock to some. I was interested in the Nephilim, being an archaeologist, and then the giants and the archaeology, sure. But I wasn't quite interested in any of the other. until I came in, as my friend Chase Kleski would say, drug me in kicking and screaming. And I was, because something happened in 2008 called the Stephenville UFO sighting. Remember that? It was pretty big. It was national news. It was on Larry King. I interviewed Steve Allen, who was an eyewitness to it. He's a pilot. This is an area in Texas that is the ranch and cattle, they're the ranch and cattle capital of the world. They don't care about UFOs. These are hardworking people on ranches. They're just living their normal lives. So for the Stephenville UFO sighting to be such a big event, why? Because the people in the community, right? The postmaster, the sheriff's office, the deputy who was on patrol, these guys, everyone saw this thing, and in over several communities. And people who would normally not ever say anything, this was so big that everyone saw it. You couldn't, It was interesting that day that I was through that area about 30 minutes before that sighting happened. And then a couple of hours later, I started hearing reports, hey, somebody saw something. There's a nuclear plant there, not in Stephenville in Erath County, over the county next to it. And the report was that it was going from the nuclear plant area towards Stephenville. And when I interviewed Steve Allen, he said that they estimated the speeds to be between 1,600 and 1,800 miles per hour. Through the Freedom of Information Act, they were able to release the radar reports from the FAA, and I understand now they will not do that. But they did in 2008, and it shows the radar reports. And Paula Harris, I think, has shown that before, if I'm right, back in 2011 or 12, and Glen Rose, they had that. And it shows these, I think it was F-16s in pursuit of this, and they can never catch it. As a matter of fact, the Air Force in Carswell, Fort Worth, Texas, denied having any aircraft in that area. For 10 days, they said, no, we didn't have anything over there. No, there was no aircraft. No, we weren't doing anything over there. Until that came out, and they said, well, okay, maybe we were, right? So they had to change their story. Steve Allen, though, said, I was outside with his friends. He said, I saw it. And he said, we didn't know what it was, but he said minutes later, the F-16s were low on the deck, and they were going fast. And he said, I knew something was up. Everyone saw this over there. My point is that something happened, somebody saw something, and that's undeniable. I didn't see it personally, but it brought me back to an account when I was 17. See, I saw something at 17 I couldn't explain. I was with 3 of my high school buddies, and we were out late one night, and we had a river that ran through the town. We used to go up on this bluff and go up there and hang out. And it was getting close to midnight. I had a curfew in those days of midnight. And so I said, well, guys, I better be getting home. It's close to midnight. I got to get. We started heading down the bluff to go to the truck. And my friend Mark, who was next to me, he was going to be an Air Force pilot. He wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs. He was going to do that. He knew all about planes. He was, he was very interested in that. And he saw it, and he said, and I saw him, I said, Mark, go ahead. And he was looking up, and I said, what are you doing, man? Let's go. And he said, Aaron, what is that? And I turned around and said, I don't know. I said, let's go, come on, it's a plane. He said, no, something's not right, it's not a plane. And I said, Mark, come on, I'm going to get in trouble, let's go. And he was looking at this thing, and I got to looking at it, and he goes, well, I don't think it's a plane, Aaron. I said, well, why? And he said, well, there's no blinky things on it, right? You got some lights on there that flashes, and he said, it's not blinking. And I said, I don't know, but I don't care, let's go. And he said, Aaron, that's a solid ball of red light. It's low on the horizon. It was moving very slow. The airplane traffic in that area was very high, like 35,000 feet high. There was nothing that low. And I got to looking at it, and I thought, well, that really looks strange. And as I began to notice this thing, I began to wonder what it was. And two of our buddies who had gone down the hill, we said, hey, come back up. We want you to see something. They had to climb back up. And we all four stood there at the fence in the pasture watching this thing. It had came around to my right, went around to the back of us. We all turned around, went to the fence, and we're standing there. We're all looking at this red ball of just light floating through the air. And it does something remarkable. This thing takes off and just does all kinds of patterns that defies every known law of physics that we have. And at 17 years old, I recognized that wasn't right. Something was up. And I tell people, I write this in the book, but there's not a lot of things that can silence 4 teenage boys. And this was one of them. No one said a word. We all sit there looking at this thing, and it came, and after it did its thing, it came to a halt, and it stood. I mean, it was just motionless. And I'm trying to figure out what I just saw. And I remember very distinctly reaching down and pinching my arm, and I'm thinking, Aaron, are you awake? Is this a dream? Come on now. You're not seeing what you just saw. Something's weird, but you've got to wake up. And I was awake. I pinched myself again, and I said, guys, what was that? We're standing there seeing this, and then it does it again. And we're just wide-eyed looking at this thing, and it does the same thing, but this time it just dissipates to nothing. It didn't dart off, it just whoosh, went away just like that. And I thought, well, and this was a clear night, no clouds. I thought, what in the world are we seeing here? Well, before I got the nickname Maverick, I was actually living up to my nickname in those years. And I said, let's get in the truck and chase the thing, right? So we get in the truck, and we had to go down the hill, which means it's out of our view. We get in the truck. We have to go across the bridge and get across the river. And I'm like, let's go, because I want to get away from the obstruction of the bluff to see it again. And when we got about almost all the way through the bridge, it was gone. And I said, well, I think I knew where it's at. And that's weird, because I think it's by the airport. We had a little airport over there, just a little thing. And I said, let's go over there to the airport, because I want to know if something landed over there. So we went to the airport. The airport was closed. Now, this is out in the middle of nowhere. You can see lights and headlights for miles and miles away. And the airport was closed. There was no, you have to activate the runway lights with 7 clicks, right? And they come on and they stay on. And those runway lights were not on. There was nothing out there. There was no trucks. There was one way in and one way out, and we were on that road, and there was nothing out there. And I said, well, let's go a little further. Maybe something was out there. And we kept going, and we kept going. And we all knew those county roads like the back of our hand, right? Because we used to, well, I won't get into all that, but we knew those county roads the back way across the state line of Texas and Oklahoma. And so we knew where we were going. But we started getting out in an area I wasn't quite familiar with, and we were making turns to try to get out to where we thought it was. And then we got on some county roads we didn't know where we were at. And my friend TJ, who was driving the truck, I said, TJ, turn on your bright lights, because it is really dark out here. And he said, Aaron, I've got my bright lights on. And an eerie kind of feeling crept over me, like something is weird, because it is super dark and our headlights aren't even penetrating this. And so, being the teenage boys that we were driving 90 to nothing on the dirt road that we didn't know, and there was a huge culvert in the road. And we hit that thing at full speed, not knowing it was there. We sail over it like the Dukes of Hazzard, come across, landed on the side of the road sideways. We're going down, and the fence is in front of us going like this. And the truck slides to a stop. There's dust everywhere. We're all screaming. We jump out. And when the dust clears, that light's on the ground, about 5 miles away is what I estimate, on the ground. and there's nothing out there. Nothing. There's no highways. There's dirt roads, county roads. There's nothing out there. There's oil fields and pasture. And I said, guys, look at that. And my friend had some toy binoculars in his truck. I don't know why, but he did. And he grabbed those, and we jumped up on the hood of his truck, and we were trying to look at it the best we could with these little toy binoculars. It was the only thing we had. And when I looked at it, it was orange lights with white lights underneath, and it was on the ground. And I said, guys, there's nothing out there. There's no billboards shining lights up on a billboard. There's nothing out there. That shouldn't be out there. And we watched it, and we watched it, and we watched it. We didn't know how to get out to it. We had no idea how to get to it. And we were already way past my curfew, right? So we stood there, I don't know, 30 minutes watching this. And it didn't do anything. I thought it would do something. It never did anything. We were waiting for something. And I said, I am so late. We got to go. We got in the car, or in the truck. We finally got home, and my mother caught me. She was awake. And I tried to sneak in the house, all sneaky. She said, Aaron, it's 1 o'clock. Come here. And I said, oh, no, I'm in trouble. Go in. She said, let me smell your breath. She thought I was out drinking. I said, Mom, I haven't been drinking. She said, what have you been doing? I said, oh, no, how am I going to tell her? I said, Mom, we saw a UFO. We've been chasing it. She said, Aaron, go get in bed right now. You're grounded. I said, but Mom, I really saw a UFO. I told the guys, I said, you know what? We had a trip. We were leaving out of state the next morning early. And I said, tomorrow night, I can't come back, but tomorrow night, if you can come back out here, please come back out here at night and look across the pasture and see if you can see anything out there and see if those lights are still out there. Now, this is the days before cell phones and email and all that. And so when I got back a week or two later, I found my buddies again. And I said, what, did you go out there? And they said, yeah. And I said, was it there? And they said, no, it wasn't there. So when I wrote the book, Alien Agenda, The Return of the Nephilim, thanks to Facebook, I found all my buddies. And I said, hey, do you remember that night? And they said, yeah. I said, tell me what you know. Tell me what you remember. And all three of them, now there's 4 of us, all 3 of them gave the same consistent story after 25 years without any prompting of telling them what I thought or saw. And I said, is it okay if I write this in the book? Because, see, there was a question mark in my mind at age 17 about what I saw. I didn't know what it was. And I went on with my life, but there was a question mark that I could not explain. I had no answer for it. And then 2008, Stephenville UFO sighting happened near where I lived. That hit close to home. And I thought, well, if the county deputies and sheriff's department are seeing it, and if the mailman's seeing it, and if the mayor's seeing it, something's up. And I wanted to get an answer for those things. So when I tell you I've had sacred cows slaughtered, I tell you that sometimes changing our mind is not easy. See, because I had to change my mind on some things. But when I understood that there was a tie, I thought, why hadn't I seen this before? And I was so intrigued, I wanted to try to bridge the gap, if you will, into writing this book, Alien Agenda, The Return of the Nephilim. We're talking about seed wars, because the seed of the serpent, remember, they shall mix themselves with the seed of men. Something's going on that's corrupting the seed line. We see this in Cush, he begat Nimrod. In the Greek, he's the Gibberim. This is also in the Epic of Gilgamesh. If you don't know that, I would encourage you to go see that or to go read it. Nimrod is Gilgamesh, is Osiris, is Apollo. These guys are all the same. Names change throughout history. Why? Because we do that. It changes with the cultures. Do you know what the name of Istanbul used to be before it was Istanbul? What? And what was it before Constantinople? Does anyone know? I'll let you look it up. I'm not going to tell you. What was the name of Cape Kennedy, before Cape Kennedy. So we see that names change throughout history. This is not a surprise. Gilgamesh was Nimrod. Gilgamesh is described as 6 fingers. He's holding a lion. This is a rather poor picture. I apologize, but I wanted you to see that he's holding a lion. It's not a kitty cat. It's a lion. Gilgamesh was a giant with 6 fingers and 6 toes, holding a lion like you would if you picked up your house cat. The Sumerian tablet of Gilgamesh, you see him here sitting on his throne, and you see these guys coming and approaching him. Was he a giant? The evidence is looking like he certainly was. Did you know they found the tomb of Gilgamesh? Archaeologists in Iraq believe that they have found the lost tomb of the king of Gilgamesh, which is an epic written about 2,500 years before the birth of Christ. This goes back a long time. So I'll let you read that on your own. Gilgamesh tomb found, but they're finding things. Remember I told you about the convergence of evidence? Something's happening again that was happening back in Genesis 6. That's why I wanted to lay the foundation for you. Because it says in the prophecies, as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For in those days they were, before the flood, they were eating and drinking. Okay, but what were they doing back then? Not eating and drinking, although it says that. It was describing the activities. But what was the central activity? The fallen angels descending on Mount Hermon at the place of anathema, corrupting the bloodlines. See, that prophecy that was given in Daniel that the Nephilim will return, that they shall blend themselves with the seed of man and they shall not mix. Remember I was telling you about the Chimeras? These guys are coming back. That's my personal opinion. As an archaeologist, I can't prove it, but I can tell you from ancient writings and history that I believe the Nephilim are coming back. And they're not here to help us. That's my personal opinion. James Carmen interviewed me a couple of years ago, and he said, Aaron, what do you think these things are? I don't know, James Carmen. And I said, well, I'll just have to give you the honest answer. I think that these are not here to help us. And he said, really? And I said, yes. And he said, do you think they're evil? And I said, well, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm going off the testimonies of people who say they are. See, because when I researched this book, a third of these sightings, I say a third, but there's 2 or 3% of these sightings that cannot be explained. And most of them are accounted with not very good experiences. I've only heard a few that has not been, but most of them have been pretty frightening. And I have to tell you that according to their accounts, that they say what's happened to them has been a very frightening experience. And I told James, I said, I don't think they're here to help us. And I told him what I thought. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, thank you for being honest. Because, see, sometimes that view goes against the grain. And he said, good. He said, I don't think so either. And we talked for a little bit on camera. But there's something going on behind the scenes. And the tie is this, is that what they were doing back in those days, they're now doing again, but they're doing it a little different this time. How are they doing it? How are they blending themselves with the seed of men again? And not just men, animals. We know it as abduction experiences, etc. But they're taking people against their will for the most part, losing hours or days or even a week of time. Not because they want to go, because they are forced against their will to go. What's going on? Something's happening. They weren't doing it like they did back in those days. They're doing it a little different this time, but they're doing the same thing. Nothing new is under the sun, is it? They're taking the seed of humanity and blending it with whatever. And I think they're creating another race of Nephilim. Can I prove it? Not necessarily, but there's enough evidence that we all know that leads to that, because we know the testimonies of people who say that they've had that happen to them. Something's going on. Transgenics, the return of the Nephilim. What does it all mean for us? If those guys are coming back, what does it mean? I think it means that something's coming down the pike that's not good. That's my opinion. But I don't think these guys are here to help us. I think they're here for an ulterior motive, and it's for them. It's not for us. Now, you may disagree, and that's okay. This is a big footprint that was found in the banks of the Paluxy River near Glenrose. That's a 24-inch human track. Is it human? Or is it Nephilim? That's a cast of that thing. That's huge, isn't it? We're talking about convergence of evidence. You know who that is? Tasha Yar from Star Trek. I don't know how she got in there. Oh, there's Stanton. Sorry, Stanton. I plugged you. I sat next to Stanton yesterday. Oh, there's Travis, too. I said, Stan, man, it's good to see you. And he looked at me. I said, Stan, don't you remember me? He's looking at me blankly. I said, this is the hat. Come on, the cowboy hat. I'm from Texas. He said, no. He's shaking his head, no. And I said, you know, I was the guy in Roswell. I met you. I debuted the book. They put me out on the curb. See, all those guys were in the museum in air conditioning. I was out in 105-degree Roswell weather out on the curb with my book. And so I got hot, and I had a guy with me, and I said, would you please watch my books while I go in, and I'm going to cool off and get something to drink. And I walked in there, and there's Stanton Freeman, and there's Travis Walton, and there's all these, Paula was in there. I said, what are y'all guys doing in here? And Paula said, well, we're all in here. And I said, well, how did y'all get in here? I'm out on the curb. And so when I met Stanton for the first time, he said, where are you at? I said, I'm out on the curb. They got me on the curb. He said, why? And I said, I guess it's I'm from Texas. I don't know. I guess they think it's okay. But, you know, I did really, very well out there. I'm used to the heat anyway. But I was giving Stanton Freeman a hard time. He's a good guy. This is Alien Agenda, The Return of the Nephilim. This is the book I co-authored with Dr. McDaniel. And the book did well. We wanted to provide something new for you. And I thought it was very important to provide information that maybe you hadn't heard of before. I certainly hadn't heard of it before. And I wanted to converge the evidence for you to bridge the gap and hopefully provide answers that could help explain the UFO phenomenon. And see, I think these guys have been here, and they've been here for a long time. And I don't think they're here to help us. That's my opinion. But what's the alien agenda and the return of the Nephilim? These guys are coming back. And we write about it in the book, Alien Agenda. This is Chase and I at Tiwanaku. I've done a lot of work in these areas. I told you earlier I go to great lengths to bring you information, and I do. There's a handful of us out there doing that. You see, I can't, nor do I want to be in the mainstream. I chose to be outside the mainstream because you can't get anything done. We do need academics. I'm not saying we don't. We do. But there's areas of academics that refuse to investigate this phenomenon. They refuse to investigate the Nephilim or the giants. They refuse to investigate what I call forbidden archaeology. They won't investigate certainly UFOs or anything associated. They just don't. They won't. So you have to be outside the box to do it. And I decided a long time ago that if you're going to do it, you have to go all the way, because there's a point of no return. Because once you go, there's no going back. You are not going to be accepted. And I thought the truth was worth it. I thought bringing out the truth, whatever that truth led to, was worth it. See, I don't try to convince people of anything. I just want the evidence to speak for itself. I present the evidence, and I put it on the table, and I say, if all we do is discuss it, that's okay. We don't have to come to a conclusion. We don't have to say, this is it. We don't know for sure. I can say this is what the evidence is leading to. I can tell you that this is what we see in archaeology, and this is what we see in history. I can tell you my opinions, but don't trust my word for it. My opinions are basically worthless. Why do I say that? Because I want you to go out and research for yourself. Know for yourself. Don't take my word for it. I know what I believe because I believe it and it's convinced me. Doesn't mean you have to believe it. Go do your own research. That's the point I'm wanting to make. You have to do your own research. And if all you do is listen to speakers and you read books, fine. I realize people can't travel the world and they don't want to write their own books. And writing a book is very tedious, by the way. It's mind-numbing. And but the people who do are bringing you information, and that information is worth reading. And so I like to put information out on the table. Let's put it up for discussion, whether we agree or not. And most of my colleagues and scholars on the academia side do not agree. Now, there's a few that do, but most of them will not. This film, Finding Noah, by the way, I have not been their fan, nor do I want to be, but they will not take the time to go. They think it's a waste of time. Do you know King Herod's tomb? Before they found it, they said it never existed. You'll never find King Herod's tomb. They said the Hittites never existed. You're not going to find anything about the Hittites because there's nothing there. They never existed until they found evidence of the Hittites. When I was in Turkey, I went to the museum, and they got a great, in Ankara, Turkey, the capital of Turkey, they got a great museum full of Hittite artifacts. That day, I went, and knowing museums, when I go anywhere, I'm in a museum normally. I thought, man, they're not going to let me lug my camera in there and take pictures. I'm not going to take this thing around and hold it all day. I decided to leave my camera. And I get in there, and they said, oh, you can take all the pictures you want. I left my camera. I can't believe it. After all the times, oh, yeah, you can take all the pictures you want. Hopefully my friend was with me, and he had his camera. We got all the pictures. The point is that the Hittites did exist. And yes, they found King Herod's tomb. They said they'd never do it, they'd never find it, and they did. What happened? Boom, about 2008, they found it. What happens if we find the ark? What does that mean? I'll leave that for you to decide. See, what if it's there? My question to you is, what if? What if it's there? What does that mean? What does that mean about our history? That's L.A. Marzulli. We went down to Peru, studying. L.A. had me study these elongated skulls. Have you heard about the elongated skulls? Yeah, L.A. Marzulli had me, and Chase Klesky, and some others, we were the first scientific team to scientifically study the elongated skulls. And L.A. asked me as an archaeologist to come down there and study 4 specific skulls. I did. Chase brought her forensic equipment. Let me tell you, without Chase, we wouldn't have got what we got done. Thank you, Chase. Are you here? Is she here? If you see Chase, tell her thank you. She's a dear friend of mine, and she is really a great investigator. And she had all of her stuff, and man, she whipped it all out, and we got a lot of stuff done. And she is a valuable asset to investigative research. And so we were able to do these studies on these skulls. My report's written in in one of my books. Now, the Alien Agenda book that I brought is sold out. It's gone. It went out yesterday. No more copies. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get it on my website, aaronjudkins.com, if you want a copy. If you want the Peru journal, I have 3 copies left of those. And in the back of those journals, I write my report about these skulls. We're in Chongos here. This is the city of the dead. It's about 17 acres. And here are these human skulls, and bones are everywhere. Here's me holding an elongated skull. question is, are these Nephilim? This was an infant between 15 and 22 months old, and it's about 2,000 years old. We got to unwrap this, and this is on Watchers 8. If you've not seen Watchers 8, you need to get Watchers 8. This is Senior 1 at the Paracas History Museum holding the skull. This is Puma Punka. And this is Machu Picchu. Director Brent Baum and Matthew Marsden from Black Hawk Down. Remember the guy with the cast? He's the producer of Finding Noah and director Brent Baum. There's those guys interviewing me at Machu Picchu for the film. This is the Peru Expedition Journal I was telling you about. I got 3 copies of these left. We've got just a few minutes here, but I hope I gave you some information that was new for you, or at least challenged you. I had a guy come up to me yesterday, and he goes, I want to thank you because you're challenging what I believe. And I said, it's okay. I've been challenged too. We should be challenged. And my goal is to challenge you. My challenge to you is go see if these things are true for yourself. Don't take my word for it. I humbly put this before you in your hands and ask that you would look for these things. Will the Nephilim return at the time of the end? I think so. I think so. There are possibilities that they will be in the armies in the last days. Some say the Battle of Armageddon. I don't know. I know there's something going on. There's something coming, and we need to be prepared for it. Please remember Finding Noah. Go to findingnoah.com. We have one showing on October 8th. This is a very well-produced film, and you'll see me climbing that mountain. It's not an entertainment film. It's a documentary. You'll probably get some entertainment watching me climb that mountain. I got a pretty scruffy beard. I look a lot different in the film, but it was really a joy and honor and a privilege to do that and to bring you this information, not only in Finding Noah, but in the return of the Nephilim. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.